Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the GnomeCast. People of all makes and models, gamers. How's it going? I have a couple of guests and people that I want to talk about with some games and see what they're up to, see what I'm up to, and a couple of news items and some things going on in the greater game community. So let's start. We'll start on the left. Svard, how's life?
Hey, life is good. I'm in the midst of the first set of exams right now. I'm pretty relaxed for the rest. I am I'm here because I'm one of the admins of Game Detectives, which is a fairly large ARG community, which got together in 2015 during the Steam Winter Sale.
Yeah, I've seen you've been involved in a fair number of the ARGs, and you keep trying to get me to put them in the news wrap up, and I keep not doing it. It's not on purpose. I swear. I try to go through some of the different ARG stuff and understand how all of these things are pieced together, and I can't find a coherent way to make it. I don't know. Some of it's just ridiculously complicated.
It definitely is a niche thing. You have to be really into mystery to even want to delve into this stuff, which is why we try to make the wiki as comprehensive as possible and to get you up to snuff immediately.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. All right, let's hop over to the other side. We've got Whitehawk is one of the moderators that I've got on Discord, and a shameless Overwatch player, or at least was, showing me up every time we've played any matches together, because I'm terrible and he's not quite as terrible in any respect.
Yeah, that's about it for me. I don't have any online presence for game stuff other than I'm the mod in your chat, so hi everyone. That's all you need to know about me. I'm better than Tarmack at games.
Yeah, that is very true. But now, to be fair, that's not a very high bar. But
yeah, okay.
Whatever. It's all good. We got a chance to meet up at PAX. That was an absolute blast. And
yeah, that was good. PAX was pretty great.
I had a lot of fun. I need to make sure that I go to more of those where possible. And last but not least, we have Mr. Welsknight.
Hello.
You can call him a family-friendly gamer. He's got a YouTube channel. Does an awful lot of Minecraft stuff, ridiculous builds and all of that. And then I believe there was another channel that's decidedly less family-friendly.
Yeah, started a second channel a couple months ago, mostly for my own sanity, so that I don't feel like I have to play, But that second channel is for games that would not necessarily fit on the main channel, whether it's stuff where the game isn't family friendly or games that are just really outside of the vein of what my primary audience is.
Right. Absolutely. Okay. So what I wanted to start with is the games that, I mean, everybody kind of starts with the games they're playing. And that's totally fine. A lot of that's new games and whatnot. But I'm kind of curious, and we can start with Whitehawk maybe. What are the games that you're playing right now? And what's so damn good about them? Why are you bothering to play that? Why does it matter?
So recently, all I've been doing, honestly, is playing Destiny 2.
You're one of those.
That's about the extent of things I've been doing. That came out, and I just dropped everything else I was playing. I've only been messing around with that right now.
How's the performance on it?
The performance was good. So there was a weird bug on launch where performance would degrade slowly over time. So you had to reset the game every hour and a half. But they had a patch a few days that fixed that. And other than that bug, the performance has been excellent for me. Right. I have no complaints.
Is it hugely improved over Destiny 1? I mean, I know that the story was a concern for Destiny 1 for a long time. The VO with Peter Dinklage and whatnot being replaced.
Yeah. So I do think for the most part, it's a considerable improvement over Destiny 1. The story, there's an actual story this time. There's not, because in Destiny 1, there was the awful Grimoire system where you had to get access any of the lore in the game. They didn't tell you. You had to go online to their website and read just pages of lore, which was great for the people who are really into the game, but kind of terrible if you're just playing it, because most of the things you were doing in the game were only loosely connected. This
Right.
game, they actually like set up like a big bad guy. They have like a nice progression of like you're aiming towards your end goal. There's nice cutscenes with big explosions and production values. It's a lot better put together than the first one in that regard.
I kind of avoided it because it's the whole MMO thing. I mean, I lost, God, 7-8 years of my life to World of Warcraft. and I just it worries me because I don't know that I can put it down. You know, they all of them, they all leverage the daily quest thing and this, you have to keep coming back every single day and just live in the game. Does that matter as much, or?
Yeah, so that's fair. They toned that down a lot in Destiny 2, actually. So once you hit endgame, there's only like a set number of activities that you can do per week that advances your character.
Right.
And then any time spent other than that is like you get no direct progression treadmill. So I'm kind of like a very casual trash player for that game right now, so I'm very okay with having like at most like 8 hours of content a week. Because that's fine for me. I can spend like a couple nights a week, open it up, play it. Like obviously when the game came out and I was like leveling everything, I spent a lot more time. But like once you hit endgame in Destiny 2, there's actually like a lot less to do. Some of the more hardcore players are very upset about that because they want to do the thing you're describing where they play 8 hours a day, every day at least, and they just go crazy with it.
Right.
So for someone who wants to do that, Destiny 2 is actually, in a sense, worse than the first game.
That's a positive
But
thing.
for like a more casual perspective, Destiny 2 is better because
Right.
there's just less to do and keep up with each week.
Well, Svard, either you played Destiny 2 at all?
Nope.
No, not at all.
So we're all in the same boat except for Whitehawk. We avoid that stuff like the plague. Is that?
I mean, that's fair.
With all the noise about the exploitative reasons of Activision, I just avoided it.
Right.
I kind of mostly.
No, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say I kind of fell out of love with first-person shooters in general a few years ago. I think it was kind of that COD release where every year it was, basically a reskinned same game, and like when I was in college, we played tons and tons of COD, sitting on a couch and stuff. And then eventually just got to the point where I'm like, why am I doing this? RPGs are so much more fun, or like other games just kind of hold my interest more than, and I mean, it doesn't help that I'm terrible at shooters. So,
yeah, I'm with you there. Played COD in college. God, we played GoldenEye. I feel like the old man in the room. I think I probably am. So Svard, actually, that's a really good point about it. Was in Destiny 1, you had the armor reskins or the shaders that you could do, and it was just a thing that was in the game, and then they decided they were going to charge for it, right?
Exactly.
So
it's not that I play Destiny 1 either, because I just don't have a PlayStation 4, and it was not on PC.
fair enough. Okay, so Svard, what games have you been playing? Like, what's exciting you in the gaming world these days?
As normie as that may sound, but PUBG is really enticing me. Yeah, the the rounds are fairly short. It feels like a thriller. Every game is a thriller, and when you lose everything, it's just one single game. It's not a lot.
Mm-hmm.
What is less mainstream, what I really like is RimWorld. It is a colony simulator, like Dwarf Fortress, only is doable. Dwarf Fortress is really dense to get into. You don't have a cursor and everything.
Yeah.
But RimWorld is just almost perfect in every sense of the word.
Okay, so if you're not really crazy into the mechanics and the math, because Dwarf Fortress was special for some of that kind of stuff. I don't think I've played RimWorld. I might have given it a try at one point, but I don't remember. So yeah, something to maybe consider.
It's killer good. It's like I second RimWorld for sure. It's fantastic.
Yeah. Well, you're kind of the builder type, so I guess that would make a certain degree of sense. So other than Minecraft, what have you got on the go, Wells?
I have been playing a massive amount of Total War Warhammer 2.
Ah, yes.
I've been a Total War fan since the original one came out in like 2000, the original Shogun, which I played back on like my 1995. It was like a gateway maybe or something. I don't remember, but I've been playing Total War forever and ever and ever. Like as long as Total War has existed, I've owned every single one. I've put over 1,000 hours into most of them. Like I've just been a huge fan of the franchise, and Warhammer 2 just came out maybe a month or two ago, something like that. So I've been putting tons of time into that and enjoying it immensely. Been playing a lot of The Binding of Isaac as well, because it's a great game to just kind of like sit down and do like one run.
Yeah.
You know, just quick play for half an hour or whatever and call it good. So, but yeah, Total War Warhammer 2 all the way. It's, if you're into like 4X games, big grand strategy games like Civilization and stuff, it's definitely something that's worth looking at for sure.
I always had dreams of it. I've played them. I got a chance to play a little bit of that at PAX. It should be the Capcom booth, I do believe. And I mean, it was fun. The thing is, I just had no idea what was going on. And yeah, I don't know. I guess I'm probably a casual gamer, I guess, where it comes right down to it. I can't get into some of those that are just ridiculously complicated, because it is. I mean, I don't know. Anyways, that's just me. I to jump back to Svard's comment on PUBG. What about Fortnite? Does anybody?
Oh, Fortnite. I tried it for a few games, but I thought the map was too small, and you die too easily. With PUBG, you have a more vast circle. And you have some time to prepare, so it really comes down to your own scavenging skill rather than the luck of the draw, whether you are the one in the winning match in the pile of dog shit at the start of the game.
Right. Okay. Whitehawk Wells, have you tried at Fortnite at all?
Nope.
No?
Yeah, I played a few games. My opinion's pretty similar to Svard, because like I really dislike the small map size. Like it kind of forces all the games to play in a very similar fashion, whereas part of the appeal of PUBG is that you can kind of play the game in however way you want. You can be constantly fighting, or you can be running from people and scavenging.
Yeah.
And you just don't get that in Fortnite. It does have a really cool element of when you get to like the near the end of the game, everyone has a bunch of resources and you can construct makeshift bases, and you have these like very cool dynamic encounters. So I think there's potential there if they build out that system more, or maybe if the player base just gets like more adept at using that, it could be really fun. But my initial experience,
it seemed like a neat feature, being able to do a bit of crafting and building and stuff during the game. But I mean, I guess it's more difficult as well to hide in the bushes when you actually have draw distance and stuff like that. This is sort of a problem that PUBG has. It's a bit janky on the graphics side, isn't it?
Yeah,
Yes.
although in the last update they've optimized it greatly. I now have a playable frame rate, so that's good.
That's a bonus. They did say they were going to release in December, I think. I don't recall exactly what date, but it was supposed to be something they were shooting for a final release right away.
yeah, they haven't set a final date. They're aiming for, I think, like mid to late December. I've kind of like weaned off of PUBG because a lot of what they've been doing is they haven't been pushing as many updates to the live server, because they have like some pretty significant system overhauls in the 1.0 update with their like additional like terrain traversal vaulting system thing and their new map. So when I first started playing the game, like when it came out, there would consistently be updates that like improve the netcode a little bit, improve the performance a little bit. So I was kind of okay with the jank because it was constantly getting better. And when it stopped constantly getting better, it started to grate on me more, and I noticed it more. So I think it's very janky right now. I think the core of the game is amazing, and I'll definitely be going back to it once they have the big like 1.0 release.
Right.
But every game I've played recently, I just get really mad at like some like bad netcode, or I get like some obnoxious frame drop somewhere. So
I think my biggest problem with those games is the one-shot kill. It's always bothered me is that I had absolutely, well, okay, I shouldn't say I had absolutely no way of preventing it. Obviously, you can pick your positioning and being cautious is an important thing, but it's entirely possible to get shot and have your match end where you just had nothing else you didn't know anybody was around at all. And being somebody who's really not good at shooters, it causes me frustration, but
I can see that, but I'm bad at shooters as well. But I dislike the shooting mechanic the least of PUBG. It's like the scavenging, and that's the most fun.
I mean, Tarmack, you just got to get good, man.
I know,
yeah, obviously,
I know, right? I mean, I play Dark Souls. Dark Souls is fun. I haven't played 2. I kept getting recommendations that 2 was basically the worst game ever and not worth playing. And so I went from 1 to 3, and then I just never got a chance to go back and play Dark Souls 2. I probably should do that at some point. I think that's probably a good idea. I've been playing a bunch of things. Call of Duty, I got review code for recently, and holy hell, is it boring. I've played a couple of missions and a little bit of multiplayer, and I just can't. I can't spend any time with it. It's just not an exciting game. Which is so disappointing. They were supposed to be, this was supposed to be the big Battlefield competitor. And I mean, it's going to sell 1 million copies or several million copies, I guess you could say. But God, I was hoping for something new. I don't know. Other than that, unfortunately, Sea of Thieves is very NDA'd. But for things that they've shown publicly, God, it's the water so gorgeous in that game. It's amazing. Oh my God. I don't know. That one's a fun one. And the last one's XCOM. I've been playing this on stream lately a lot, and what really struck me about XCOM that was so neat, and I really want to do a piece on this, was in War for the Chosen, they added a whole bunch of systems that increase your attachment to the characters that you've got, to your soldiers. So you've got, being able to have the characters bond with each other. And so you get like a combat bonus and stuff like that. You have these 2 guys, or whatever combination is going to be, and they get a combat bonus, but it's because they're friends. They've been together on a bunch of missions, and they're, that's just a thing that's there. You can memorialize them with posters. You can take pictures of, all of your people if they had a great mission, or if you lost somebody. And I had an amazing mission happen where I was down to 2 soldiers left on the battlefield, one of which was unconscious next to the extract point. And the other one was not injured, but close enough that she could actually get to him, pick him up, and get him extracted from the mission. Both of them would have died the next turn. She could have saved herself, but it was just one of those sort of neat emergent storytelling kinds of things that you don't expect in a game like that. Like the developers had no influence over that actually happening right then and there, and it was just because they added all these little other systems into the game that made it, really, really exciting. I've had a blast with XCOM 2. Have you guys played?
I haven't played XCOM 2, but that sounds amazing. And if you like that, you should play RimWorld.
Yeah.
Coming back to RimWorld. Okay, so give me some more context on RimWorld then, because what I saw, and if you look at a lot of the game footage, it looks much more like a production line simulator, right? You're doing all these different things and trying to create basically a giant machine almost. Right? Yeah,
so it's a colony simulator, kind of. So like you're running a colony of people that crashed on an alien planet, right? And you need to provide them with basic needs, shelter, food, etc. You need to defend against raiders and all this other kind of stuff. But it's a game with just a ton of depth, like everything from social aspects where, colonist A won't get along with colonist B, to colonist C wants a bigger bedroom than colonist D because he's the jealous type. And like it's ridiculous how in depth it gets, but not in a way that's like super, super, super complicated to understand. Like it's a game that's fairly easy to get into, but you can get deeper and deeper and deeper into it for like weeks. But I mean, it's also a game that can be just like brutally punishing at times. Like you'll have this colonist, you'll have this colony that's going great, you're halfway through, and then suddenly you'll just get hit with like this massive raid and 75% of your people die.
Yeah.
Like I don't know. It's very, very good. And it does kind of have that like prison architect building aspect to it to an extent, but it's also very much about kind of managing your colonists and putting them in the right jobs and giving them the right skill sets and all of that other kind of stuff.
And it's totally procedurally generated?
I believe so. Svard can.
Yeah, it is generated based on the storyteller, which is an AI, which you can choose what kind of AI you want, and there are modded AIs as well. One of the most popular AIs is a Cthulhu storyteller.
Okay,
so you might like that.
That sounds
the most
interesting.
The worst problem I have with RimWorld is when I have someone that's staggeringly ugly. He's so ugly, he makes other people want to set chairs on fire. What?
What? How is that?
Yep.
That's a pretty mean mechanic.
One of those. Oh, okay. Yeah, I feel bad for that character. One of those people that there's just nobody for them.
Yeah, I mean, to kind of perfectly encapsulate the game, right? Like I did 2 seasons of RimWorld on my second channel, and the first season everything was going pretty well, and then I got hit with like a toxic fallout event, which is basically this like event that happens where there's like a toxic rain, and if your people go outside for too long, they'll get sick. Everything alive on the map that's outside will basically die. So you have to like keep your colonists indoors. You need to, your crops are all going to die. So you got to be prepared for it, right? And it was that first season was basically my first time with RimWorld. I was fairly new to the game, and I had never come across that particular event before, the toxic fallout. So I'm like, oh, okay, well, whatever. It'll last a couple days, and then we'll be on our way. No, it lasts for like a month. Like it goes on, and by the time the thing is over, I'm like, okay, all of my people are starving to death. I have no food. The toxic fallout finally ended, and all of my colonists died like immediately afterwards because they all just starved to death. Like they went crazy. They lost their minds, and they just like died. Right. So I'm like, okay, well, I guess that's the end of season 1 because I don't like save scumming. So I started season 2. I get like a week into season, and a week in game, right? Not a week of real life time, but like a week in game into season 2, toxic fallout again. And I'm like, are you kidding me? This is absolutely ridiculous. But then the cool thing about it was that like that time I knew kind of what was coming, so I was able to handle it much, much better. And my colonists lived through that second toxic fallout because it's a learning experience. It's kind of like Dark Souls in that way. You're presented with these challenges that just completely blindside you, but then the more you play it, you learn how to overcome those and deal with those challenges.
This actually it reminds me of another game that I got a chance to play at PAX as well. It was called Frostpunk. I think they've delayed it until sometime next year. It was supposed to be out the end of this year. It's the same developers for This War of Mine, where you're playing these characters that are in just a ridiculous war-torn country, and you're making very, very difficult decisions. So in Frostpunk, it was a city simulator. You're building kind of a ringed city where you've got this power unit in the middle, and you have to determine basically everything, what you're building, sending people out to go gather resources and things like that. But you might have to make a choice between, let's say you're running out of resources. You absolutely, like, in order to survive, you need more resources. So you have to put the children to work. Oh, sorry, guys, off to the mines you go. And everything has kind of a negative consequence that goes along with it. And it just looks, it looks like so much fun. Whitehawk, did you get a chance to play that at PAX when you were there?
So I did, and I had no idea what I was doing. I really didn't get the sense of what was happening in the game. Like I also don't play city builders, so maybe it just might be like a genre familiarity thing, but I really didn't I didn't get it.
Yeah. And, to be fair, I don't think, if I recall correctly, that English was the first language of the publisher that was there. So there were some issues with communicating why or what it is that you're doing. Not in the game, like the dialogue in the game was fine, but the demo that they were, when they're talking you through these different things. But that's basically it. Is you're trying to survive and have your people survive, but you have to make. You really have to make all of these different decisions, which can be really quite difficult, and frustrating at times.
I mean, all of that sounds great. Like, this War of Mine was like one of my favorite gaming experiences the last few years. Like, very, very few games have like that kind of like emotional gut punch that I felt when I played this War of Mine. Like, it was like entirely wrenching. Like trying to scavenge by with everything with like the small number of characters you care about was just just so well done. So given the pedigree of that game, I'm like very interested to see what happens with Frostpunk. But my limited experience with it like wasn't the best.
I'm so excited for it. I think I might have turned myself up a little too much. Let's put that back. I had a blast when I was playing it, and I really want to play it again. It was so much fun, and the developers were great to talk to. So I don't know. PAX was so good. I just love cons. There's so many people that get to the point, in the game industry when they're doing reviews and things like that they get really tired of going to conventions. Myself, I don't know that that's ever going to happen. I just love it too much. It's way, way too much fun.
I have yet to actually be able to go to one.
No, eh? Where are you in the country, though?
Well, for the first roughly year and a half that my channel existed, I was in Wisconsin, right. Which is apparently the farthest away from every convention ever. Like, it's like,
yeah, that sounds about right.
You'd think like centrally located within the United States, there would be at least one convention where everyone's like, oh, well, yeah, it's right in the middle of the U.S. This is no, it's all East Coast, West Coast, or down south. Like, there's nothing within, like a 20-hour drive.
I mean, geographically it's the center, but population density-wise, there's not much out there. Well,
you'd think Chicago, though. Like, Chicago would be a good location for a convention, you'd think. I mean, and Chicago's centrally located, has a major international airport, but no cons in Chicago. No, or at least no gaming cons in Chicago.
Boston and Texas, right? So...
Yep, pretty much. And all the other like more minor conventions are still like East Coast, West Coast, California, like TwitchCon, California. And now I live in
a certain amount of sense. I mean,
it does to an extent. But now I live in Tennessee, and I'm fairly close to Nashville, but I just haven't had like schedule time. Like, I've always been busy with other stuff when cons are going on. So.
Yeah. Well, I would definitely suggest it. I've been to E3 before. That was many, many years ago, and it was a blast. I mean, if you have been to any of these things and you think the booths at PAX are big, looking at the Xbox booth or Microsoft booth at E3 is just stupid. Nintendo had they had widescreen monitors stacked probably 3 stories tall. And all they had on them was Mario jumping. Like, that's it. The excess is, pretty crazy on that stuff.
Nintendo.
Oh, they're so much fun, aren't they? Actually, that kind of leads us into our topic of the month that I wanted to discuss. Nintendo is doing really, really well. Lately, and there's been some questions, people talking about mobile and the issues that mobile has. And so what I wanted to talk about, or what I wanted to really dive into, is, can mobile be fixed? Like right now, so the situation we're currently in is we have 2 enormous app stores, right? We've got the Apple App Store, we've got Android, or the Google Play. And both of them are just filled to the brim with trash. right? The only apps that get installed are the ones that are in, the top 100, top 10 for sure, but top 100 are going to be seen in a particular category. And after that, you may as well not bother, right? So developing for it is a complete crapshoot, absolute crapshoot. The marketing budget that's required to make these things a success is huge. You see things like, was it Mobile Strike was the one that Schwarzenegger was pushing for a while. And, Clash of Clans, and of course all of those sorts of things. They have these huge marketing budgets behind all of them. Razer just put out a gaming phone that is sharp on all edges, has no headphone jack, and other sorts of issues. So, I mean, like, this is where mobile gaming is. It's become a joke, right? You have a tablet, you have a phone, you can play these things, but they're all, I don't know, they're all weak.
I was hoping for Razer to actually release their own kind of store, like Steam, but with content control, where indeed only good games would be published on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They let me down on that one.
I mean, it's plausible that they're not there yet, I guess. But that's part of what makes me curious on what exactly is the problem with mobile. I see a couple of issues that I think are a big problem, but it's interesting to watch Nintendo because the Switch is a mobile platform, really. I mean, they posted a bunch of numbers, and I have to deeply apologize to people that have watched me tear Nintendo apart for things in the past, because one of my predictions was that this was going to be their last console. And obviously that's not the case. They're doing very, very well. But in a mobile market where games are trash, and getting any kind of good, really, really good stuff on your phone is, it's very, very difficult. But Nintendo is just absolutely slaughtering it. I mean, they do have great properties. They do have a lot of those sort of benefits. But I'm curious, what do you guys think about some of this stuff? What can be done to fix mobile? Is Nintendo the one that's doing it right, or are they kind of a special case?
I think Nintendo is like chasing a different market than what you see on like mobile phones. Because I think mobile phones are just so ubiquitous. Like, you have every like house mom and little kid playing a game on your phone. Every like working professional who dumps $1,000 into Clash of Clans to make themselves feel happier about their mundane day or whatever. But like, it's just not a platform for gamers. And I think to do that, you'd have to do something like what Svard was talking about, with Razer curating their own store, doing something aggressive. I don't think the mobile platform, as it exists on mobile phones, is something that's really salvageable at this point. Nintendo kind of gets at the demand of mobile games, but like, they have their own dedicated handheld and ecosystem, and it's a lot more powerful than like your average phone, or at least like you're not worried about it draining your battery when you're pumping out Zelda or Mario on the go.
Right.
Because
Yeah, I think
it's only
it's an important distinction between mobile gaming and handheld gaming, I think.
Oh yes.
Because nobody's going to buy a Switch so they can keep it in their pocket all day, and their boss can call them when they're at work, and they can hail an Uber. Like, you don't need a Switch to get through daily life. In today's day and age, you basically need a cell phone if you're a professional of any kind, right? Like, it's a necessity. And I think the thing with mobile gaming, as we know it, apps on cell phones and tablets and stuff like that, is that it's really not for gamers in the sense that we usually think of when we say gamers, right? It's for people who just want something to kill a little time while they're on their way to work waiting for the bus, or they want something they can load up and hand to their kids at the restaurant to shut them up. Or it's not for traditional gamers. It's for much more casual people when it comes to gaming. And I think as a result, the quality standards are much less. People are a lot of those people aren't really looking for Zelda. They're looking for Solitaire or something they can just load up for a couple minutes and, you know, putz around in, or something they can hand off to their kids or whatever. I think it's an important distinction. Whereas Nintendo, handheld. I mean, and Nintendo, let's be honest, Nintendo's had the handheld market locked down for decades. like since the original Game Boy, Nintendo has been the handheld,
always, right?
Yeah, I mean, basically, as long as handheld gaming has been a thing for the most part, Nintendo has been the top dog, and I don't see that changing. And honestly, the Switch, I think, is a great system. I've got one, and it certainly has its perks for sure. And I see Svard holding up the DS. I've got, you know, I think I own.
It's not a DS.
It's not.
Watch.
Oh, okay. Yep, you're right. But yeah, I mean, I think I own 3 or 4 DSs. I think I still have my old Game Boy Advance SP somewhere. Like, I mean, it goes on and on and on. Nintendo has always kind of had that handheld market, and I don't think you can really compare handheld gaming to mobile gaming. I think they are two very separate things.
Okay.
I agree. I think like early in the life cycle of mobile gaming, like a lot of gamers were hoping mobile gaming would just be an extension of like handheld gaming, but it just hasn't played out that way in the slightest.
Right.
Yeah. I mean,
well, yeah, I'm thinking about how big the target markets are actually of Nintendo games and traditional mobile games as we know them now, because simply the target market of gamers is significantly smaller than the target market of everyone, house moms, grandmothers, children, and as such, the profit margins on a simple pay-to-win app are so much larger, just given this discrepancy in between the two target markets.
Okay.
So, and just look at development budget too. I mean, there's no way you can tell me that it costs as much money to develop like a Clash of Clans compared to like a Breath of the Wild.
Absolutely. Now, Nintendo did make a comment about Super Mario Run that as yet it's not profitable enough, despite having sold how many millions of copies or something along those lines. I want to say that what was the other one? Good Lord, I've lost the name of it. I'm gonna have to look that up now, because blast. Anyways, they released a premium mobile game, right? Super Mario Run was $10. It might have been on sale a couple of times for $5 or something along those lines. It hasn't been doing as well as they said that they wanted it to do. The other game that they had,
I think
about the Fire Emblem game.
Fire Emblem, yeah, yes, that's the one I was looking for. Was a game that had made somewhere around $100 million.
I think this ties in with my argument about these target markets. The Gachapon game appeals to this casual target market, while a premium upfront game is not. It has no market on mobile. It has a market on DS. It has a market on Switch, but not on mobile phones.
Right. No, I don't disagree at all. I mean, it makes a certain degree of sense. I'm curious though. So the phone argument, I understand, right? Everybody needs their phone. If you're playing games on your phone all day long, and people already find this out, their phone's dead before they have a chance to charge it. They have to be a little bit more cautious, right? So there's just kind of an apprehension to do that in the first place. Tablets, though, I mean, the Switch is really just a tablet with controllers. Right? We have tablets that are as powerful or close to as powerful as the Switch is. And the Switch can now play Doom, or will be shortly. I can't remember if they actually did, if they've released that yet. Is the control scheme what's holding mobile back, do you think?
To some extent, I'd say absolutely. I think it's very hard to have a control. I mean, it very much depends on the genre of game. But I mean, realistically, you're never going to have a solid first-person shooter with tight controls on a touchscreen when the only controller is the touchscreen. Like it's just not. It's not there. I mean, there's certain genres of game that you could probably get away with it, but like, I mean, I do a lot of Minecraft stuff. I cannot play I can't play mobile versions of Minecraft. I can't do it. Like, I'm so used to a mouse and keyboard that playing Pocket Edition, the mobile version, just frustrates me. It drives me crazy because the controls are clunky and I mean, and the game is, I think, $8 or something like that. Like it's fairly cheap, but the controls, the poor controls, just ruin it for me. So I think if you're going to have solid gaming on a tablet or a phone for that matter, you need a proper control mechanism of some sort, whether that's a peripheral or whatever.
Right. Or luck of the draw that your game has that kind of control where that's all it needs, right? So Mario Run is a good example of that. All you need is either press to hold or tap, right? Those are the only controls in that game. You want to jump or you want to, whatever you're doing. It's very, very simple, and it's actually not a bad game. I didn't actually go out and buy it, but just playing through the free stuff, it wasn't a bad game to have on the phone. Did they ask too much price-wise? Maybe, I don't know.
Well, I think it's a hard sell to offer a game for $9.99. I mean, you look at major console releases and PC releases. You're looking usually $30 to $60 for a game, right? It's pretty hard to sell a game for that price on mobile when everything else on mobile is $4.99 or free to play with ads, or keeping in mind that mobile is appealing to that non-gamer, so to speak. It's pretty hard to sell a non-gamer on shelling out $59.99 for a title that they're going to play on their phone.
Right. Well, that absolutely feeds into Svard's point on it, right? Is that you're dealing with a demographic of people that perhaps is uncomfortable with spending money on their phone, or maybe just doesn't have access to it, right? I mean, the whole free-to-play thing, yes, there's a lot of microtransactions in there, but there's also a lot of advertisements, right? And so advertisements are a way for a user to effectively pay their way without having to pony up any cash. So that makes a certain degree of sense.
Well, and I think there's also some small, at least some small demographic that is almost embarrassed to have people knowing that they're gaming. Yeah, they don't want the 49-year-old business professional working in a corporation doesn't necessarily want to let his 70-year-old boss know that he's playing a game on his phone. Or that he's playing a game, so he does it on his phone where he can kind of do it discreetly. I mean, we've all done the discreet cell phone thing, right? Where we're looking at something, we're like, we don't want them to see. No one's going to see what I'm typing here.
Yeah, I've been on an elevator where I've randomly heard the Pokemon Go song, blaring at full blast because somebody forgot to turn it down. Yeah, no, that's certainly an issue.
I mean, and some people want to be discreet, and a cell phone or a tablet is something that there's valid reasons to have outside of gaming. Whereas, like a Nintendo Switch, there's really not a reason to own a Nintendo Switch other than gaming. Right. And I don't think that's a huge demographic that's like that, but I think that demographic certainly exists.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fair. I do think that demographic is kind of dying out, though. Like, that's more a generational age thing, and gamers are getting pretty old now. So I don't think that will be relevant for very long. But I agree with your points. Yeah.
There are quite some phone gaming peripherals where you can clamp your phone in between them for controls, or small controllers like this 8-bit do wireless Zero, which is very small. You can just put it in your pockets.
Right.
I think we can look at those sale figures actually to gauge what the audience is for quote unquote serious games on mobile.
Well, that's a fair point. I hadn't really considered that. Yeah, the market for gaming peripherals would certainly be, I mean, it'll be lower. The people that want to play gaming on, or want a game on the go, not everybody wants to go buy extra kit to go along with it. So instead of trying to game on their phone, they'll just get a DS or a Switch or whatever. But it would certainly give you an idea of how many of those people you're dealing with, for sure. Absolutely, I think so. So one of the other things that was kind of nifty about this, when I was looking into it about the Switch specifically, is they found that the Switch was not being predominantly used by people hooked up to their TVs at home. It was actually an awful lot more middle of the road than that. People were out and about, whether sometimes or whatnot. There was a lot of criticism. A lot of people were saying when the Switch was coming out, okay, this is going to be a device that I have no desire to take it with me and play it with friends on some picnic table on a rooftop. Because that's what the ad showed. Like people were looking at, well, that's ridiculous. I'll never do that. But it turns out, actually, that's kind of what people are doing with it, right? It's not just sitting in the dock, plugged into their TV at home, being a traditional Nintendo console. So it was just really, really neat to see. I was wrong. I genuinely was wrong, and I'm willing to own up to it. They have done an amazing job with this. Do you think there's any concern that we're going to see the DS disappear?
I think for sure we are going to see that, yes.
Yeah, it's very reminiscent of what they did with the DS initially when they launched the DS, and then the Game Boy, they were like, oh no, the Game Boy's still totally a thing until the DS took off, and then they canned the Game Boy. I think we're seeing the same thing here. It's the DS is gone.
Right.
I think it's important to note though that price point wise, the DS has a much lower barrier to entry.
Right. Also availability wise.
Yeah. Well, and availability is a thing too, but that's only going to last for so long. Eventually, the huge demand for the Switch is going to die off a little bit, and you will actually be able to find them.
Mm-hmm.
But the DS, you're looking at, you can probably get a used DS for $100 at like a GameStop or something similar to that. A Switch, you're looking at $300 plus games on top of that. Because the Switch doesn't come with a game unless you get something that's more than. You're talking. You can buy 3 DSs for the cost of a single Switch, maybe even more than that.
Yeah.
And I think for a parent, and keep in mind, Nintendo is very much about that whole kind of family gaming aspect, right? Where when parents are buying their kid's first console, they're quite possibly getting a Nintendo system of some sort. I think it's a pretty hard sell to a parent to drop, $400 on a console or a handheld system for their kid, when their kid can, when instead you're looking at like $100 for a handheld for that kid.
Yeah.
I remember my first handheld system was a Game Boy that my grandpa bought for me, much to my father's displeasure. And I can guarantee that my grandpa would not have purchased that system for me if it was a $400 system. There's no way, but it was much more affordable than that. And as a result, I got my first Game Boy for Christmas when I was however many years old with some Mario game of some sort or another. And that was kind of the first gaming system that I actually owned and didn't have to go to a friend's house to mooch off of them for.
Right. So are we going to see a price drop as Nintendo's next play, or are we going to see a redesign of a Switch where maybe it's a split, so it would actually be a clamshell design but with the touchscreen kind of thing? Because that's one of the problems that's too big.
I think we're going to see a lower budget or a lower cost kind of quote unquote budget version of the Switch down the road.
Okay.
With a lower barrier to entry, probably some kind of like what they did with the 3DS versus the 2DS. I kind of foresee them doing something similar to that with the Switch.
Thoughts, Whitehawk? You look like you want to say something.
That's feasible. I think it's a little bit premature to talk about that because of how successful the Switch is. I don't think we're going to see a price drop or any redesign anytime soon, because like the 3DS had a price drop within the first year of its life or something, but it wasn't selling. It wasn't the huge smash success that Switch was. I don't I think it's a little bit premature to talk about that, but I think given Nintendo's history, it is likely that we will see a budget version of it down the road.
Right.
Yeah, and I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon either. I mean, didn't Nintendo just announce a new version of the DS fairly recently? I mean, I don't think the Switch is going to be changing anytime soon, but
not really. They dropped the non-XL version from their support. They are just going to sell the new 3DS XL version.
I thought they just announced a new 2DS version of some sort. I might be wrong. But either way, I mean, I don't think any of this is going to happen until they're phased
out. That
sound
familiar. They released it was a clamshell 2DS.
Yeah,
wasn't it?
Yeah, that's what it was. Yep. Yeah. I mean, I don't think any of this is going to happen until they're at the point where they're phasing out the DS. But I think when they do finally start phasing out the DS, we're going to see a redesign of the Switch of some sort that kind of fills that budget, low barrier to entry, buy this for a kid for their birthday kind of niche,
right?
That the DS will be leaving behind as it gets phased out.
Right. And kind of get back to the throw it in your pocket size and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yep. Especially if they announced that they would stop making Pokemons for the 3DS and games altogether after Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. So,
well, fair enough. And you'll see the market shift with that, right? Because that's a huge system seller for sure.
Yep, I thought they also announced that they were going to have a full-blown Pokemon title for the Switch coming out.
They did. I think that's one of the big selling points for me for this, or at least for me personally for the Switch, is that I've always kind of liked the Nintendo properties, but they were always split across like their handheld and their console, and I didn't quite like their stuff enough to go out and buy it. I would always like borrow friends to play the new Mario game or whatever. But with the Switch, everything's kind of consolidated on one platform. I have to buy it once, and then I can play every Nintendo IP. Yeah. And so that's appealing because I'd like to go play another Pokemon game. I haven't played one in like a decade or so, but I'm not going to go out and buy a 3DS, and I don't care about it enough to go like borrow friends to play Pokemon. Because, I mean, it's just Pokemon. It's just a nostalgia trip.
No, that makes sense. So to go back to the Razor point and what Svard was saying about the store kind of thing, on the topic of mobile games kind of being this mess of just nonsense where you can't even get a foothold, is there value in a curated store, and would it make a difference? Right? I mean, you can curate it, but if the games don't change, then you have exactly the same issue. They're all still weak, thin games. If there was a curated store, do you think we would get anything that's a bit more in depth, and would people be willing to spend $5 or $10 instead of no, it has to be free?
I think it could work, but it would appeal to a much smaller demographic than your average mobile game.
Right.
Yeah. And there's also the point that you can't have another manufacturer for iOS. There's just one manufacturer for iOS, and that is the main target market for mobile gaming. Mm-hmm. The Razer phone can be on Android just fine, but the best quality mobile games come out for iOS first.
Right. Okay, that makes a certain degree of sense, I think. So a combination of this is not what people are using this device for, the controls are shite, and the store is a mess. Seems we got a bit of a conclusion that none of us really think that mobile's actually a thing. You have to kind of dissociate yourself from mobile gaming with phones to handheld gaming. I agree with Wells. I think that's a good distinction to make. It seems entirely reasonable.
That's not to say that I wouldn't like to see better things on my phone. I'd like to have something that's not like a gacha game that go on my phone, but I don't see any mechanism by which that has like that is successful. Like it seems like just too niche, too like out of the realm of how that ecosystems have developed, which is kind of sad.
The only games that I've really played on mobile that I could say seem like they're a bit maybe not even. It's the escape room games are actually quite good on a tablet. A little bit rough on a phone because the screen is so small. I mean, that's an issue as well. I think Shadowrun was on mobile too, but good luck playing it on a phone. Right, this tiny text on, it's fine. You can have the greatest resolution of all time, but if you can't read it, it's not going to help you.
You ready for the 4K Razer gaming phone?
Well, yeah, that's right.
It's like 1440p, but yeah.
They said they've got
technically
it's an amazing phone that none of their headsets will plug into because they didn't think of that for whatever reason.
Yeah, I hate that trend so much in mobile. I just I bought my nice headsets. Let me use them. Dang it.
I agree for the most part, but I did go and I spent $100 at Costco on a set of Bluetooth headphones, and Bluetooth is pretty wonderful. I use that for workouts and stuff like that too. It's pretty great stuff, but it makes me wonder, the amount of space that they're saving by that. What else are they getting? What else of value is there that's more than regular headsets? I just don't know.
Especially on a gaming phone. Like, how do you not put a headphone jack on a gaming phone? It's like, I can't even understand where in the world, like, whose brilliant idea was that?
Are they?
I can understand.
And allow me to go on a tangent here for a minute. All right,
Please do.
What is it?
Please
Saturday.
do.
This is now Soapbox Saturday. All right. So I feel very strongly that phones are progressively getting worse as time goes on. Like, I've had flagship Android smartphones basically as long as they've existed. I had the very first Motorola Droid when it came out. I was a Verizon wireless employee at the time, right? And then after that, I had the next, flagship Verizon Android phone, and on and on and on. I've still got I think I have a Motorola Droid Turbo now or something like that, right? Basically, every time I get a new phone, I'm trying to get like the best Android smartphone that money can buy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why in the world can I not find a flagship decent phone that has a physical keyboard? There's not a single one in existence. All I want is a physical keyboard so that when I'm trying to type something, the screen doesn't lag a little bit. Do you know how long it takes me to type a text message and then autocorrect? Do you know how many mistakes are in my text messages? Because my phone's like, oh, you meant to say something completely unrelated to what you actually typed? Why? It's not a difficult thing.
BlackBerry is actually on this market. There's the BlackBerry Priv and the BlackBerry Key one.
Do they have with the actual physical keyboard still?
Yeah,
no.
There are Android phones with a physical keyboard. The Priv is like a sliding thingy, and the Key one is one block with the keyboard underneath.
I don't know if I'd call BlackBerry a flagship phone, though. I mean, there are phones with physical keyboards that exist that run Android.
I don't know if the market
trash.
I don't know if the market for what you want is large enough to justify a keyboard on a flagship phone, though.
Tell that to do you know how many spelling? I went to school to be an English education. I was an English education major, right? I have very good grammar. I have decent spelling. I had almost no grammatical or spelling errors in any of my text messages until I no longer could have a physical keyboard, and then they're just constant. like autocorrect is the worst thing. When anyway, I'm sorry, soapbox, but it seems like. But since the first Motorola Droid came out, we've gotten faster processors and stuff like that. But we're now first we lost physical keyboards. Now we're losing headphone jacks. What are they? The next they're going to take away screens. You're going to have to buy a peripheral screen, right? Oh, get a Bluetooth screen for an additional $100.
It's going to be Google Glass, right?
Yeah, Google Glass, exactly.
The next thing it'll just be no buttons, right? Is that there won't be a sleep button or a home button or volume buttons. It'll all be you got to tap it to wake it up, or breathe on it, or
talk to it.
Hold it close to your heart.
Wake up, Siri.
Yeah.
Siri, wake up.
Or, it'll just know that you're about to pick it up because that's where things seem to be going.
Yeah. Or we lost the ability to take batteries out of phones. There's another one, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Which is great, which doesn't sound like a big thing until you call technical support, and the first thing they tell you to do is like, oh yeah, just take the battery out and put it back in and reset. No, you can't do that anymore. Now you got to like send it in to your cell phone. Anyway, so they can,
so you can pay them to repair it for you. All right.
Yep.
We are going to take a quick break right about now. Be about 7 minutes, give or take. So please enjoy some music, and we will see you again shortly. All right, so the next bit of what I wanted to talk about is a little bit on gaming news, things that have happened lately, stuff that's in the news over the last little while, and kind of get your feel for what the hell's going on, whether it's good news, bad news, and anything that you guys have heard about it as well. So I wanted to start off with, there has been a number of games recently that are getting praise for not having loot boxes. So Monster Hunter World, they said they're not having loot boxes. Dauntless is getting rid of the loot boxes that they had. So Dauntless is in alpha right now, or beta. These terms are meaningless in the game industry these days.
Closed beta something or other, yeah.
Yeah, so they had a bunch of invites and things sent out. They used to have loot boxes in it. I played a bit of Dauntless. You would go around and you'd gather these, you do your different quests and you get a loot box and it's all flashy and all that kind of good stuff. Are we really at this point where it's so ubiquitous that now we have to say, great, this game doesn't have it. Let's all talk about that game because that game doesn't have the crappy thing that all of these other ones do.
Yeah, I think it's kind of a tacit admission by the games industry that loot boxes are so profitable that like they are in the games by default now, and like you only remove loot boxes to like get that extra marketing boost or because it absolutely doesn't fit your game and you actually have integrity. But when does that happen? But yeah, I think we have reached that point.
Well, yeah, I mean, loot boxes are a fairly simple thing to implement and can drive continuing profits. I mean, as much as I don't necessarily like loot boxes, I understand why we see them so much.
I think this is a thing of target markets as well, because we are actually already talking about the so-called good free-to-play games, which were Warframe and Path of Exile for a long time. And I'm excited to see Dauntless join these games in these ranks. Mm-hmm. But we have a certain demographic that is aware of these issues, that listens to podcasts like these, or audience right here. Those people are aware, and they are yearning for games without exploitative things in them, like loot boxes. As long as the market is not getting too divided, that this niche is too scattered out, there is enough profit to be made there.
Right.
But yeah, not to withstand, indeed, the developer or publisher has to aim for that market, as simply the market for exploiting people is so much larger.
Mm-hmm. It strikes me as very similar to the indie devs that uploaded their game to the Pirate Bay themselves, because they just wanted to have the publicity hit by saying, fine, people are going to steal it. We're not going to have any DRM in it. Here, go steal the game. And if you like it, come back to us and give us some money. Right, there were a lot of musicians that did that and some comedians that did that, I do believe, where they would just kind of put their thing out there and pay us what you want, sort of the Humble Bundle kind of model. I mean, you can get a ridiculous number of games on Humble for $1 every time they put something up. They had to incentivize, okay, we have to lock a couple of games behind a bit of a paywall, and we'll do that. But it's very much the same thing. And I don't want to speak negatively of the devs for putting it out there that they're not going to have loot boxes, because I think it's great, right? And their job is to get good PR, and if their good PR also matches the ethics and morality that I'm trying to say is correct, then I think it's fine. It just worries me a little bit because it's become a big thing over the last little while. To have these big news pieces about, oh my God, this game doesn't have these loot boxes in it. God, it's painful. It's just.
Well, I think on the flip side of that, though, too, it's also partially, I think, because we've had big stories that are the exact opposite, like the whole Shadow of War thing, or Shadow of Mortar, Shadow of War, whatever that one was that just recently had loot boxes. For single player games, and everyone lost their minds about it because it was a single player game. And, I think the reason we're seeing stories now about games that are not having loot boxes is because it's the kind of the inverse of that. We have this huge story about Shadow of Mortar or Shadow of War, whatever it was called, and now on the flip side, they're saying, oh, okay, well, there was this big controversy about this. Let's look at games that are the opposite of that.
Mm-hmm. That makes a fair amount of sense. Sorry, you look like you have something to add there, Whitehawk.
Kind of tangential. So I think there's some weird. My knowledge of economics isn't the best, so I'm sure someone will correct me later in chat or YouTube comments or something. But there is some level of market dynamics that goes on where you have if the majority is doing one thing, there's a room for a niche that is doing the other thing. So if everyone is doing loot boxes, if you just say, well, I'm not doing loot boxes, and there's a small enough number of companies that aren't doing loot boxes, that's kind of cynically just a boon to them. They could do loot boxes, or they could be a part of this minority that's rebelling against it, but not really rebelling because that's only working because everyone else is doing it.
Right. Sort of the contrarian in society saying, well, yes, fine, everybody's going to go buy this. Well, I'm going to go buy the other thing because fair enough. There was another one that was very, very similar on the opposing side, was the most recent Call of Duty, World War II. They actually have, and it's not really a mission per se. I mean, they have their set missions. You're going to go to Normandy and you're going to storm the beach and that kind of stuff. And this doesn't bleed into that as far as I understand. But in their sort of social area where you run around with other players, not necessarily killing them, there are daily quests that you get. So you're supposed to go and unlock something or do this many matches of this type or whatever the case. But they have a mission in that area, which is technically Normandy after the beach storm. Where you get rewards by watching people open 3 loot boxes. It's a daily quest that you can potentially receive to watch somebody else open loot boxes.
That's just disgusting. I'm not as angry at loot boxes as I think a lot of other people are, but that just crosses way too far. There's so many psychologically predatory things, and then to be oh, well, now we'll reward you for buying into our system even more. It's just
mm-hmm. I have a bit of a different concern about them in general. I think that it is beyond shady to have glorified World War II the way that they did. Normandy. There's a reason why that's a famous battle, right? It was
not because it was some great
absolutely terrible in every conceivable respect. And so you've got that combined with them selling the digital currency and stuff over top of Normandy battle scenes and things along those lines, and then loot boxes are this big thing there. It just, oh god. And the
I don't quite remember the casinos in Saving Private Ryan, actually.
Yes, yeah, it was that was the director's cut. That's where that was. Okay, so we'll move on to violence in video games. Violence in video games. So Sony did their press conference fairly recently. I don't remember where it was because for whatever reason I didn't take note of that. But they showed a bunch of different trailers, as they always do, right? They move from one game to the next. And there were a bunch of people that were quite upset at the Last of Us 2 trailer because of how violent it was. If you haven't seen it, please do go take a look at some point. But it involves a person being strung up by their neck by a rope, and it involves a knife and a hammer and bones breaking and all kinds of stuff. Like it's a great trailer for adults, right? It's totally fine. It gives you an idea of what the game's about. It shows a lot about the world, and that was exactly what their response to it was. When they received a bit of controversy about this, that people were upset, their response was quite simply that The Last of Us 2 is a game marketed at adults. And we're sorry that you're offended by the trailer, but we don't need to think of the kids at all times. I assume I'm probably not going to get an awful lot of blowback on this one, but figured I'd put it out to you guys and see what you think about this whole situation over trailer violence.
I completely disagree. Games are ruining society. No, I mean,
from a family-friendly Minecraft guy, right?
Absolutely. No, I mean, the whole thing is ridiculous. You don't see people raising a stink because the latest, blockbuster action flick has violence in the trailer when that trailer airs on TV. People are like, oh, 300 is too violent. You can't show that. The kids watch this television show. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, but I do think it. Go ahead, Fight.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Okay, sure. I do think a lot of the response just shows the immaturity of the medium. A lot of people still like to. This is just the latest version of video games are violent and that's bad. So kind of whatever. I think personally, like you said, the trailer was great. I honestly didn't really care for the trailer because it was like. I thought tonally it was great, but it didn't really tell me anything about the world. It was just like a lot of like people getting beat up in violence, and there was no context to any of the characters, which like
right. No, fair
I didn't like the trailer that much, but like the people are upset about the violence in the trailer. I think is silly.
Well, I think the sentiment that is uttered by Sony is completely valid for the game itself, for the complete product that people buy, where there is a warning on the box, where a consumer make an informed decision on buying it. But the trailer itself is more than just a 300 trailer. It is definitely torture and definitely shock content on there, which you are exposed to at random. They could be at any point. It could be as an ad before a YouTube video that's completely unrelated. And as such, I wouldn't say I'm very daddy-ish on that point. Like, I don't want to see any violence, but the fact that trailer was kind of no, maybe just a little bit.
That's a fair point. And so you're fine. You're sitting there and you're watching the Sony press conference with your kids, right, or something along those lines. And this is something that I had considered before as well. Is they're kind of peppering these different videos as they go through. So it is entirely possible, depending on how they've scheduled their show, just like E3 or any other major press event, where you've got a really cartoony game followed by a really serious one. I could see that. That's fairly reasonable. I like the first Last of Us 2 trailer better.
I agree with that.
And because it gives a lot of that context of the characters, right? Ellie's sitting there on the bed or whatever playing guitar, and it's just this, she's kind of grown up, and it's sort of a bit sad, but whatever. And then it pans back and you see there's a bunch of bodies on the ground and she's the only one sitting there alive. I mean, there's real context to the character there that matters. And I agree. The new trailer didn't do much of that. It might, once you play the game, I guess I could see, because if you get introduced to those characters and get a bit more of a feel for what actually happened there, it could make a bit more sense. So maybe it was just a shock value sort of thing. They do, game industry does that all the time.
I remember the Dead Space 2 trailer with Your Mom Hates Dead Space 2. That was awful. That was so...
Those marketing pushes bother me, because, like, I think that this one, like, there's a little bit of debate to be had. That Dead Space 2 thing, just, like... When you're, like, so explicit and upfront about it, being like, hey, we're gamers, we're counterculture, like, that's kind of, like, ruining the maturity of the medium, and it kind of, like... isn't helping. I understand why they do it from a marketing perspective, but it's still obnoxious.
Oh, that makes sense. I think it's a bit of a problem that the game industry has created for itself, so they have to figure out their own solution. I mean, EA and Activision and all of these companies have been selling M-rated games, but they're all marketed to kids, right? Like that's the big push, right? Grand Theft Auto, it's this terrible, horrible game that so many parents let their kids play, which fine. If you're going to give the kid the context, I will give a controversial opinion. I believe it's controversial. I think children should be taught how to swear properly. I think they should be taught while they're in elementary school, perhaps, maybe wait until junior high. But I think they should be taught what the words mean, when they're useful, and maybe don't say them around grandma, right? Some of those kinds of things. You don't want to do this in front of your teacher at school. Here's what the words are, and here's what they mean. I think that has real value, because otherwise they're going to learn from the kid down the street that doesn't know better. And they're going to use them wrong, just like everybody else. So the same sort of thing is true here. If you want your kids to play mature games, fine, play them with them. Explain what's realistic about it and what's not, and make sure that they understand what fantasy is. I think that makes a great deal of sense. But it's just me.
So let me weigh in on that, actually. And this is going to be kind of ironic coming from me, a family-friendly YouTuber who doesn't swear in any of my videos or streams ever, right? So for those of you who don't know, I'm a veteran. I've got about 11 years in the United States Army. I'm not anti-profanity. Okay, I don't get offended when people say four-letter words. It doesn't bother me or hurt my feelings or make me feel whatever, right? I'm not anti-profanity. But so often I see comments from usually younger people that are just nothing but profanity. And it's like, okay, just because you know these words doesn't mean that you're an adult. Profanity needs to serve a purpose when it's used. If you just randomly add vulgarity into sentences, that it doesn't mean anything. It needs to emphasize a point. It's I always called them as a staff sergeant in the United States Army. I always called them motivational sentence enhancers, because do this does not have the same effect as effing do this, right? It's a different thing. And profanity has its place in society for sure, and in conversation, but it needs to serve a purpose. And so often that gets lost on people, especially younger people who are just learning these words. I actually think you're absolutely right, Tarmack. Teach kids are going to learn to swear. Kids are going to swear. It's going to happen. Yeah. But I think there's something to be said to learning the proper manner in which to do so. Yeah,
they're going to learn it anyways. So who do you want to teach them, yourself or somebody else?
Well, they're going to learn the words, but I mean, I think it's important for them to learn when, where, and why to use those words.
Yeah, I think this actually this kind of goes back to what Svard was saying about it, which is a valid point, and even what Whitehawk's talking about the story not necessarily resonating in the trailer. Violence with no context can have the same effect, right? Mm-hmm. If there's no value or reason behind it, if people don't understand why what was going on is occurring, then it loses its impact. So yeah, it makes a good deal of sense.
I agree. I mean, there's a time and a place for everything, but it's the important part is to figure out what that proper time and place is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I mostly agree with what you guys are saying, because there's a lot of telling kids that something is bad, you should just never use it because it's bad, and that's the worst way to teach someone something. You teach them that the word is bad because it signifies some very intense emotion. It's a much stronger statement than something otherwise, and then you're okay, I understand why it's bad and understand when it's appropriate to use it. Whereas if you just tell them it's bad, don't use it, well, every kid you ever know is going to use it because they're told it's bad.
Don't press the red button.
Counterproductive. Yeah, counterproductive on all fronts. So, yeah.
Okay. Good stuff. Moving on to my last topic. there have been some concerns over the last little while about single-player AAA games. So we've seen a huge switch to a lot of the multiplayer stuff that's out there. Overwatch, PUBG. I mean, take your pick. There's been an obvious switch away in the big publishers from a lot of that kind of content. They're really liking the multiplayer stuff because it's easier and better to monetize than single-player games. At least that's the theory. But we do have a couple of stories over the last little while of people saying, you know what, you don't have to worry about that at all. One of the Visceral devs, so EA shut down Visceral games recently. Was it Visceral Studios? Can't remember. They were working on a single-player Star Wars game, and EA wants to pivot this, that was their phrasing, into a games-as-a-service kind of model, which basically means now it's not just a $60 game you can buy and play. Now it's going to be microtransactions and loot boxes and multiplayer and all of that stuff. But one of the ex-Visceral devs was saying, yeah, there's no reason to be afraid of single-player games going away anytime soon. And Rockstar also decided that they were going to get behind that themselves because they've been facing a bit of criticism about Grand Theft Auto 5 because the story didn't get the attention it was supposed to receive. It was supposed to have a story expansion that never happened. They got caught up in the whole shark cards and online stuff all the time. And so the fear then came out that, well, Red Dead Redemption 2 that they're working on, that's supposed to be out next year sometime, well, it's probably just going to be all online, multiplayer and maybe it's horse cards or carriage cards or something like that. I don't know who to believe on that front. I've never really thought that single player was in that much of a danger. It just is not necessarily going to come from the big publishers. Svard, you got any comments on that one?
Yeah, I do for sure think that Red Dead Redemption 2 is going to be awful in that regard, and it's going to be multiplayer based with shark cards and everything, simply because that is where the big bucks are. Mm-hmm. EA and Rockstar have no interest in a big value production that can just bomb and it can just return nothing of profit. Mm-hmm. Also, especially EA and Activision, I think, are very happy with the fact that it's online because they can pull the plug whenever they want to and the next installment of the game comes out.
Right. Okay.
So, for sure, AAA single-player games, I think we are reaching an era where that just ends completely. And no, you don't think so, Wells?
Oh, no, let's hear it.
No, I don't.
Get your soapbox out.
Look at Nintendo just this year. Super Mario, whatever it is, Origin? No, not Origins. Whatever the new Mario game is, I forget. I just ordered it. Odyssey. Yes, thank you. Odyssey. You got Breath of the Wild. You got a Fire Emblem game coming up. I mean, and that's just Nintendo. Total War that just came out, which is Creative Assembly published by Sega. That's essentially a single. It has multiplayer, but nobody really plays the multiplayer. You got your Civilization games. I don't think single player is going anywhere. We might see less of it in some franchises and in AAA in general. It might go down a little bit, but it's not going away. I can't imagine single player just completely ending in AAA titles. There's too many AAA titles that just wouldn't work as a multiplayer game.
I want to bet you for $10 in 2 installments the Total War series is going to have a considerable online part that is not to be separated from the main game.
It could well be. It's entirely possible.
In what time frame?
I said 2 installments of Total War. So not the next one, but the one after will be virtually unplayable offline.
I will take that. Absolutely.
Mark it, clip it, hold that one. We're gonna need that in about 3 or 4 years from now.
Yeah. Oh, that's lovely. So Total War hasn't had decent multiplayer ever. You could make an argument that Shogun 2 had an okay multiplayer experience, but it suffered from huge balance issues, and it was secondary to the campaign. Total War has always been single player focused. and always will be. Because I mean, the thing is, it's not, the Total War experience is not conducive to multiplayer. Like, do you know how long it takes to do a single turn in Total War? You know, if Tarmack and I were doing a co-op campaign where we were each playing as a different faction, we need to set aside like a week to do that one campaign. Like, no, Total War will have a multiplayer mode and will have multiplayer options, but they will not be absolutely necessary. And I don't consider Total War Arena a proper main Total War title for the record. That's like a multiplayer experiment, but it's not one of their flagship titles like Warhammer or one of their historical ones.
I think they will considerably change the gameplay for getting into that online market.
It's a tough place to be. I mean, so if you look at games like, let's take Star Wars Battlefront and COD and Grand Theft Auto 5, right? What seems to make the most sense to me is that they're effectively using the single player as a way of bringing in people that they hope to convert into multiplayer users, right? So the single player user has less value to the company overall because they know that they're only going to pay it once and then, you know, in theory, leave. That was my issue with Grand Theft Auto, is that the campaign, it was kind of fun, but it was really only about 4 or 5 hours long. It took longer because you had to drive everywhere, but I mean, it was not a big game for the story. The story was just a tease. It was a way of getting you to buy it and get into this. I think Red Dead Redemption is probably going to be the same way. COD was the same way. You know, Battlefront 2, they have to put in a campaign, or they said that they're putting in a campaign because Battlefront 1 didn't have it, and probably they saw that it suffered as a result. They didn't get that initial boost of those single-player people that would otherwise have been there, and it didn't do as well as I suspect they intended it to long-term.
I mean, Battlefront 1 was also like very rushed to meet the movies. It was clearly an unfinished game. So
right.
I don't know how much of that is like they're adding it for the sequel versus like they just didn't have time the first time and go.
Right. So they just kind of kept the campaign that they were already working on and just said, all right, we'll push it till the next game instead.
Possibly, yeah.
Yeah, I think some games are conducive to multiplayer. Some games just simply will not realistically work with a thriving multiplayer community. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't see Total War as a turn-based 4X grand strategy game working in its traditional sense as a multiplayer. You can do multiplayer battles. They do have multiplayer battles available. It's just the battles, but no campaign. And they could make some sort of a mini campaign, but that will never be like the quintessential Total War experience.
It'll be interesting to see how they start to move that stuff forward, because I mean, there's always going to be that market for people that want the grand strategy stuff, right? And those people generally, if they're playing the turn-based games, they don't want real time. They don't want a couple of those other, sorts of things. So if the game changes in that direction, they're just out of the market entirely. But Sega has been known to make poor choices in the past. And from my understanding, I mean, they've done a bit of the microtransaction stuff, but they haven't really gone in on it wholesale like a lot of the others have. Right, like Activision, EA, Ubisoft, Tencent out in China, like some of these massive publishers are doing exactly that. Even Nintendo. I mean, a lot of people say Nintendo has no microtransactions, but yeah, they do. They're just $15 and come with a plastic figure. Right, it's the same overall model. They're just getting the value proposition a little bit differently. But Sega hasn't really done a lot of that. They've done some shady stuff, but they haven't gone, the amiibos, exactly. Sega hasn't really gone down that road.
Specifically, these Metroid amiibos, the hard mode was locked behind one of these.
Yeah, that bothered me. Blasted Nintendo being jerks.
Yeah, and Sega does a lot of DLC But that's I think there's a distinction to be made between DLC and microtransactions, and actually I think that's something we should talk about. But we'll get to that once we've covered this death of single player thing. I mean, the thing is, as I said, some games just won't work as a real multiplayer experience. Like if I'm playing a Total War or a Civilization, any sort of turn-based 4X grand strategy game, I don't want to sit here for 45 minutes waiting for all the other players to finish their turns before I can play again. And then I play my little 5-minute turn, and then I sit there and wait for another 45 minutes. No, absolutely not. Like that would just kill the game and the experience.
I agree.
So I have like a slightly different take on this. I don't think we're going to see like a bunch of games just flocking to multiplayer to try and like capture people with loot boxes for everything. But I do think we're going to see a lot more companies trying to continually monetize their single player games. And I think that's the bigger worry than single player games just going away. Right? Because like the loot boxes in Shadow of War are like the most probably egregious example we'll see, where like those have no place in the game. They don't add anything to the game. They just make it worse and exist to like prey on people.
Yeah.
But they added that because they like the big companies want that continuous revenue stream. They don't want the like, oh, we got a big release and we got a big influx of money and then there's a downtime and then there's a lot of unknown variability every time you release a big game. Like, are you going to make your budget back or is it going to be a flop? And the more continued games as a service type things avoid that. So they're much better from a shareholder perspective. The company has some great financial stability. So I do think we're going to see a lot more of like games trying to shoehorn loot boxes into single player or other kinds of clever ways, or clever is the wrong word, maybe malicious ways of getting people to continually spend money on their single player game, draw out the experience beyond the like initial purchase.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Like that's,
I think that makes that makes a lot of sense, and it's also going to be a big push for DRM as well. One game that effectively is not piratable is Diablo 3 because the AI is handled server side. Everything's handled server side, so you can't you can pirate the game, but it's not going to do anything when you play it. And so if developers start doing that kind of thing, hiding certain aspects of how the game does what it does behind the server side as a DRM mechanism, because they have to monetize it somehow, right? People playing Shadow of War, they figured out a way of getting infinite loot boxes in the single player game because it's not online only, technically, that they can do that. They can get away with it. And that's actually a good reminder, Wells. I think we should do a brief on that I kind of had left that in the outline and forgotten about it. The difference between microtransaction and DLC, and I like what Whitehawk said about it because this matches up with my own definition of microtransactions. In Shadow of War, they don't give you anything. It's not adding anything to the discussion, right? It's a limitation or paying to not have to wait time or anything along those lines. Versus DLC, which is they've made something and I can choose to buy that thing or not. It's one of those sorts of distinctions that I think has a certain degree of value because you're either paying for content or you're paying to skip content, which is frustrating at best.
I think there are two factors that come into play when judging whether something is DLC or whether it's a microtransaction. The first is it something I get value out of forever? Right? Like, is this content that I can make use of for as long as I play the game? Because a lot of things that we would consider microtransactions are like a speed bonus, XP bonus for the next 6 hours or whatever, right? Stuff like that, which I think we would all agree is an example of something that would be a microtransaction and not DLC, right? Yeah. So whether or not it's something that gives you value forever. I think the other test is, do I know what it is before I buy it? So, for example, skins, right? Like a skin DLC. You pay $1.99, you unlock some new skins in Assassin. You can make your main character run around dressed up like Santa Claus or whatever, right? and assassinate people.
Yeah.
That would actually be kind of
actually that was in Hitman.
amazing.
There's a Santa
But,
Claus.
was it Hitman? Yeah. I mean, but something like that. And I think most of us would say that if a skin was coming from a loot box, it would be a microtransaction. But if it's a DLC that's marked as a skin for 99 cents or whatever, would we consider that a microtransaction, or would we consider that a DLC?
That's the tricky part about it, is that you have that colloquial definition of microtransaction, which is small payment, right? And so technically you can have a small payment DLC, but when people are talking about microtransactions, what they mean is not necessarily that, right? They're talking about, I'm paying for digital currency that is of no value, or the XP boosters or loot boxes, that kind of thing.
So I think
things that are endless to be repeatable.
Yeah, I think the test is it something that gives me content forever? And B, do I know what it is before I buy it?
Yeah.
And if it is both of those things, then it is DLC. If it is not one of those things, I would consider it a microtransaction.
I like it. Whitehawk, thoughts?
I agree. I think that's a great definition. I don't really have anything to add.
I find this definition quite difficult with the introduction of the Creation Club by Bethesda. Yeah. Because we see complete trites on there. You would, in that definition, there would be mini DLC, like they are saying.
I'll grant that. I mean, to be fair, that poorly
there can
priced
still just be
DLC
bad DLC
is bad, right? So I mean, somebody puts up something for a skin for $30, right? It could be the greatest skin ever, and it's still, honestly, probably a bad value proposition, right? I don't know that bad DLC. Like I think maybe that's the qualifier, is to say, no, this is just bad DLC, because you do know what it is in advance. You can make that sort of conscious decision of, do I want that thing for the price that they're offering it for? Now, the modding scene, Nexus and whatnot for Skyrim and stuff is far superior in every conceivable way. So I don't know why anybody would buy from the Creation Club. I mean, that was supposed to be bigger mods, right? A proper community expansion and stuff, right?
They don't give one single crap about the PC market, because that market is so much smaller in comparison to the console market. On PC, it's even completely moddable. You can just import the models from the Creation Club into your editor, put them in your game, no problem whatsoever about it.
Yeah.
And it's just all about the console market.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That makes sense. But I would still say that I think that does meet the qualifications that Wells is saying, is, it does match up with DLC. It just might be bad. And that's okay, because the end consumer can make that decision themselves. Do I want to waste this money on this stupid armored horse or armored mud crab? God, I can't believe that they opened with that nonsense. Even if it was a joke. I mean, that's too on the nose.
Yeah, well, I was thinking the horse armor was so... Oh my god, yes, we do remember the horse armor in Oblivion. This is taking a rape joke and putting it in front of people.
I think they intended it as a joke, and it just fell flat. But that's how that goes.
Yeah, I mean, I think Tarmack, you're exactly right. Like, I think it's still DLC. It might be terrible DLC. It might be badly priced DLC. It might be DLC that's a complete waste of your money. But it's still DLC, because you know what it is. And if you're stupid enough to make that decision to buy it, then that's kind of on you.
Yeah.
It's like, I only drink the best bottled water. It's $100 a bottle. Well, okay, you're an idiot for buying it, but you know what you're getting before you do so. Yep. And I think that's the distinction to be drawn there. Whereas with like a loot box or an XP boost or something like that, it's either something that you can't make use of forever, or it's something where you don't really know what you're getting and you're not able to make that judgment call. Because with like loot boxes as an example, getting a proper, like, super rare legendary item, if that was marked as such and it was $1.99, maybe that is DLC, and you decide, sure, that's something I want. but it's the randomness of it that makes it such a terrible practice in general, because you don't know if you're getting that. You might be getting something that's complete garbage or that you already have 10 of.
Yeah.
And
probably are going to get something that is
garbage. Exactly. And you certainly wouldn't shell out $1.99 to get something that you already have 10 of. Nobody would do that. So I mean, there's certainly an element there that is preying on people, and it's essentially an element of gambling, which is something that's been discussed a lot lately. But
absolutely.
But and then there's of course we would all agree that there's shady DLC practices in existence as well. Most of us are probably against day one DLC for a lot of games, or taking things that really should be part of the base game as DLC. Total War, as much as I love Total War as a franchise, they are guilty of some of that kind of stuff. Like their blood and gore graphics effect is a $2.99 DLC. You have to pay $2.99 to get blood
ridiculous. I hadn't heard of that.
And I seem to remember the reason they did that was so it would be rated T instead of M.
Oh, okay. That's kind of clever.
That's interesting.
But regardless,
it's still dumb. Yeah.
When the first Total War came out, one of the main factions in Total War Warhammer was day one DLC or a pre-order bonus.
Yeah.
And that's a practice where you're like, this should really be part of the base game, But on the flip side, they've also had some absolutely awesome DLC, and I do like what they've done with Total War Warhammer 2 and DLC as it relates to Warhammer 1, because if you own both Warhammer 1 and 2, you basically get a whole bunch of extra stuff. Like if you purchase that Blood and Gore DLC for Warhammer 1, you just get it for free for Warhammer 2. You don't have to purchase it again.
I think they kind of lost the argument there by putting it up for as much as they did and not for one proverbial cent or something.
Well, maybe not. I mean, it's something that certainly has raised some red flags in the Total War community. People were upset about it, but whatever. I mean, it is what it is. And then the thing is, they do some other things with DLC, and I think as long as you're actually getting value out of the DLC that's put up, I don't really have an issue with it. I mean, I think we would all agree that dev studios have the right to make money. I mean, I think we all agree that we would all agree that developers should get paid.
For me, it all just comes down to the person buying the thing has to be able to make that decision with their eyes open, right? They have to be able to look at it without having to hunt for articles online about drop rates, and they just tell them what you're selling them and give them a price.
Yeah, let them make an informed decision. Absolutely.
Okay, so we are coming towards the end of the news bit and close-ish to the end of the show itself, but I wanted to kind of put out to you guys and see if there were any other sort of news show topics that you wanted to hit before we do a little bit of personal shilling. I know that Svard had mentioned something about Patreon and how that could be used from a development standpoint. Do you want to give that one up here?
Well, yeah, I'm wondering, we are seeing that Patreon is taking over the business model of advertisements on YouTube for single creators and small indie studios. Mm-hmm. Will Patreon be the monetization methods of the future of also mid-tier size studios, of maybe even big tier size studios? And we are seeing that they divert from a loot box approach, and they want to make good content, and as such they make a Patreon to support that. I would say that Senua's Sacrifice being like the prime example of what kind of, would that be feasible under a Patreon model to fund? Okay.
I don't think it would work for big studios. I don't think you're ever going to see people supporting EA on Patreon. I mean, I think part of the draw of a service like Patreon is that, you're supporting the little guy, right? Like Tarmack, I assume you're like a one-man show, right? Yep. I don't think you have a team of editors and people, a marketing department working for you. I'm a one-man show. I've got me, myself, and
all of this professionalism is me. It's that's amazing artwork and all that kind of good. Yeah, it's just a one man thing.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm with you. I've everything, all my editing, all my videos, all that kind of stuff is done by me, except for the artwork that I have no talent for that I commission out or have my unpaid intern do. And when I say unpaid intern, it's actually just a friend of mine who helps me out sometimes with art stuff. But anyway, Patreon, it's the whole idea of patrons, right? It goes back to ancient times, the idea of patrons of the arts, right? You have someone who does their thing, and the only reason they're able to do their thing is because they have a couple people who support them. And I think it's a much harder sell to get someone to pledge to be a patron of this giant AAA studio with a multi-million or even billion-dollar budget versus supporting that one content creator on YouTube who, maybe makes enough to keep his lights on, but without Patreon, it's a little bit of a stretch. And I think Patreon could work for like indie studios, but I don't think we'll ever see Patreon as the monetization model for AAA studios. Like, I just don't see that happening.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of disagree a bit. I think there is some potential in there. I mean, not literally Patreon itself, but some level of like premium subscription service to some like big name publisher. I give like $5 a month to EA, and it gives me a game. I get one of their major releases of my choice every 3 months or something.
Well, I mean, that already exists.
Yeah,
I mean, kind of, but like that's a lot of like old games and a lot of like things that have already been out for a while. Like EA has like their Vault thing, right? But you don't really get like I can see Patreon model working for like an indie studio. Like, I fund them continuously because I'm funding them. I get their games when they come out. I could see a similar model working in like a subscription format for a large publisher.
Don't we have some large YouTubers that are shilling on Patreon as well, who are definitely large enough to sustain themselves?
I think it's different it's different though, because the thing you got to keep in mind is that God knows where YouTube's going to be in 5 years.
Right.
And God knows if YouTube is ever going to false flag a channel and they're going to get shut down forever. Like, YouTube is such an uncertain career choice that even with your huge YouTubers who are making, tens of thousands of dollars a month, I really don't have an issue with them having a Patreon, because who knows if they're only going to be able to do this YouTube thing for the next 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, YouTube is such an uncertain market that, and as opposed to the gaming industry, gaming's not going anywhere anytime soon. There's always going to be gaming in some form.
I would. The thing about Patreon is that people are paying well over the value of what they're receiving. Right. If you go Miracle of Sound, I use his music all the time for stuff that I'm doing, and I try to give credit where credit's due. You just search Miracle of Sound on YouTube. He's a great musician. And you can give him $5 on Patreon, and every time he releases a song, it's $5. Generally speaking, that's more than the value of a song. If you were to look at the market on the whole, a song is worth about $1, right? If you're to buy it anywhere. So people are generally paying more than the market value for what they're receiving. And it strikes me that for the industry itself, I think that's unlikely to be a mass market kind of thing that can actually work. What'll happen more often, I think, is going to be the Kickstarter model. Patreon taking over and Kickstarter being so huge actually terrified me. Those things should never be centralized like that. Like, that's very, very dangerous. But we have seen a bunch of experiments in the Kickstarter space where, Shenmue 3 was one that was a Kickstarted thing. We've seen Obsidian do a couple in a row and that sort of thing. But as soon as Electronic Arts decides to jump into Kickstarter and give a whole bunch of backer rewards for people that buy, or just do it themselves so they don't have to pay the fees, that's where this is going to be really interesting to watch how it happens, and really scary. because they'll do that. They'll, you want a $100 backer tier with EA, you pay that $100 and you get a copy of the game and a special icon or something that nobody else gets to have, but you're also paying 2 years in advance.
So you mean like early access?
No. Early access is not as far in advance. I'm thinking they're going to start doing it before they've made it. I think they're going to start doing it before they actually have a serviceable product.
I'm just,
and that scares the hell out of me.
But yeah, and I don't necessarily disagree with that. I mean, I think kind of building off what you said, Patreon is really like you say, you're paying more than the market worth or the general average market worth of whatever the product is. But Patreon is really more like I've always seen Patreon as a way to support people that do something you like. And if you get some extra perks out of it, great. But it's really more like, Twitch, it's like making a donation on Twitch. Are you really getting anything out of donating $10 to a streamer when they're live? Okay, well, maybe they read your name and say thank you, but you're really not getting anything out of that other than the warm and fuzzies for supporting that creator. And Patreon, I think, is very much the same way.
A girl gamer.
Yeah, and I mean, and I think Patreon is very much the same way. Like I support several different people on Patreon for various different reasons. And, they have rewards, maybe most of them. I don't even use or want the rewards. I just want to be able to throw them a couple bucks every month because I think they're doing something that I think is useful, and I want them to be able to continue doing it. And I think that's the distinction. It's about supporting the little guy versus supporting the AAA studio.
But I do see, I see where you're coming from, Svard, and I agree that they're going to test the boundaries of it. I could see one of them trying a Patreon kind of thing. I think it would flop horribly for them, but I could see them trying it. I just don't think that they'll use Patreon to do it. They'll use their own, like what Whitehawk's talking about some kind of a subscription, monthly based sort of thing where they try and give you a bunch of value adds for old games that aren't selling now anyways. And really, what you're paying to support the next new awesome project, and here's some extras so that you don't get grumpy that you just threw $100 away, or whatever the cost is. I think that makes a good degree of sense. Any other? Sorry, go ahead.
Also, what I'd like to point out: indie studios and small creators, they grow big, and I don't think they will easily give up the Patreon revenue when they grow that big. That'll
be interesting to see. You get a small indie studio in a game that finally moves to a publisher. What happens to their Patreon? I hadn't actually considered that. I would look forward to seeing how they would actually do that, and I would hope that they would take the ethical route and shut the Patreon down. But I could certainly see some less than scrupulous people not go down that road, which would be
one thing I do want to mention. This is actually from your Twitch chat. Kale Wesker said, YouTubers are in an interesting case right now, thanks in no small part to YouTube failing to support the channels through ad revenue. And I think that's actually something very important to mention as well, because we were talking earlier about what about these really big channels who don't need the Patreon. I mean, when the adpocalypse happened, I know some channels who went to 15% of their previous revenue.
Yeah.
Like, imagine you're making $10,000 a month in ad revenue. Like, that's a fair amount of money. That's a pretty large amount of money, right?
Yeah.
And then suddenly the adpocalypse happens and you're making $1,500 a month. Like, that's a huge difference. And if those people didn't have a Patreon, they could be in a pretty bad spot.
Yeah.
So Patreon allows those people to continue doing their thing. And like, I know quite a few people with relatively large channels who make most of their income from Patreon because the ad revenue just isn't there for whatever reason.
Right.
So, and let's be honest, YouTube is not great at things like, I don't know, basic communication or anything alike. I mean, YouTube is not great at supporting their creators in various different ways. I think anyone who is
jerks.
Yeah, I mean, it just the ridiculousness. Like, I'm a family-friendly YouTuber. My banner says family-friendly gaming every day. Every single video I've ever uploaded has been family-friendly, 100% like G-rated. I still get videos demonetized from time to time. Like, YouTube is such a fickle thing that it's so hard to rely solely on YouTube. And like, I have a Patreon. I do probably make enough from ad revenue that I could live without it. But then there have been months where if it weren't for Patreon, I would have been just completely out of luck. Some months you get into like the Christmas holidays when ad revenue is great. Awesome. Then you hit January and everything drops to 50% of what it was in December. And that's a different story, and the thing about Patreon is that it's a much more consistent thing. Whereas YouTube ad revenue is the opposite of that. Just soapbox again, but
yeah. We'll get you. I mean, we'll get your real one for sure.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, that just seems like the general direction. Like all content creation on all platforms on the internet is just going to like treating like YouTube or whatever your platform is like as a content delivery mechanism. And then spreading your like income through Patreon, through whatever that platform is, YouTube in this case, spreading it through like whatever other projects, sponsored things you do. Because it
goes to the idea of not putting all your eggs in one basket.
Yeah.
Because you never know when one thing is going to happen, and you don't want to. If it is something that you do full time as your job, like if you put all of your eggs in one basket, you're risking. Yeah. Essentially completely losing your job when something happens.
Yeah, just wait. We'll see it happen. We'll see somebody with a Kickstarter that was successful while they also had an active Patreon account, and then they get a big publishing deal and they just keep them all. I'm sure it's going to happen. You just wait. I think we're actually running short on time at this point. Do we have any other last minute sort of news items we wanted to bring up?
So real quick, I guess I don't want to take up too much time, but I was curious to hear everyone's thoughts on the WoW Classic that Blizzard just announced. Because I know they're like, because I've never like played WoW. I never got into that segment of gaming, but I know that Nostralius and a lot of the like vanilla servers have been really popular among people. So I'm curious to see people who are more knowledgeable of that, what they think of this announcement.
Did you guys play WoW?
I did not. I got into Lord of the Rings Online before I got to WoW, and I couldn't get into WoW like as a result.
I see.
Because the thing with Lord of the Rings Online is that out of all the MMOs I've ever played, Lord of the Rings Online had like the most amazing community out of all of them. Like it was just incredible how good that community was.
Right.
Like, WoW, you ask for help and you probably get 20 people calling you a noob and whatever else, Lord of the Rings Online, you'd ask for help and you'd have 10 people be like, oh, where are you in the world? I'll come find you and show you where you got to go. Like it's just incredible how strong that community was and how helpful and just pleasant that community was. So I just found it way too hard to get into WoW after coming from that. And I was like, why am I, doing this? Whereas,
okay, so I guess this one kind of just hits me. I played WoW since the early closed beta, and so I played through all of Vanilla, Burning Crusade, Wrath of the Lich King, and I was done about the end of Cataclysm. So I played for a great many years. It absorbed a huge amount of time, and I had some of the best experiences that I've ever had in gaming because of the guild we were in and the friends I made. It was absolutely fantastic, and I sent a message out to a couple of them saying, hey, maybe we need to get the gang back together just for a quick thing. I don't think any of us are going to spend that much time with it, though. I think we'll play a couple of things and then disappear. It's one of those... Vanilla WoW was so good because it was awesome at the time. It's no longer awesome, and I think that going back to it is actually a mistake.
Also nostalgia glasses.
Yeah. That's exactly
I'm
it.
just curious whether it's sustainable or not, because it seems like something that Blizzard looks like they're putting some effort into, but I don't know if they're going to get a real return on investment that keeps it afloat for very long.
Yeah.
Because I imagine there's a lot of people who come back to it briefly, but I don't know if it's going to stay
they'll have a burst of people that go back to it. In theory, it's not an awful idea, because once you build the game, you're only a couple of patches in because the content's not going to change, right? Their whole sales pitch is this is the vanilla experience. So they're not going to continue to patch the game and add new things and break stuff, right? So then it's just a matter of how much server hardware do they need to manage the demand, and is that worthwhile over the amount of expense or the amount of subscriptions that they're going to get as a result. And as long as that's true, they'll keep it running, and who really cares? It strikes me that they looked at the whole Nostalrius thing and Elysium and all these other servers and said, oh, there's a ton of people. You know what? Maybe we should do this. But I think a lot of those people play not because it's vanilla, but because it was free, because it was a pirate servers, right? I mean, it's a big difference between that and paying $15 a month every month to play the game. So I don't know. I don't know that it's a good idea, but I will certainly give it a try when they get around to it, for sure. All right. I think we're at the end, ladies and gentlemen of the audience. We have a little bit of shilling to do. We'll go through and just find out, you know, what people are up to, what they've got coming up over the next little while. Whitehawk, what are you doing over the next week or so? What's life hold for you?
I'll be playing more Destiny, and I don't have like an online gaming presence, so I don't really have anything to show except for Tarmack's chat. Come talk with us. Don't be a dick, so I have to ban you. I prefer it when people are nice and I don't have to do anything. Great.
Svard.
Well, yeah. So Game Detectives will continue to chug along and be a host for ARGs. We have some disclosed projects coming up, but I can't say too much about that because of who knows what's going to happen with them, where they end up. Maybe they get canned.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, you can find us on gamedetectives.net, where you will find all the links to primarily the Discord, the wiki, the subreddit, and the YouTube, which I still have to do something about and make content myself.
Game Detectives has got, thousands of people that love just poring over these different details and figuring out what the mysteries are that developers have hidden in their games and across multiple games. A lot of the time, it's just ridiculously crazy. Welsknight, where can people find you, and what are you doing?
So I have 2 channels plus Twitch. Twitch is /Welsknight. But my primary channel is family-friendly, very Minecraft-focused, but I also do some indie games and other stuff as well. Recently started I guess I describe it as like an indie game first impression series called 30 Minutes of Game. That's having a lot of fun with that. And then I do a lot of Minecraft on top of that as well. Second channel is for all the other stuff, running Total War, Isaac at the moment. Probably going to do RimWorld again at some point and some other games down the road too. But that is basically me. The YouTube channel is youtube.com/WellsNightGaming, and the second channel is youtube.com/WellsAfterDark. So yeah, you can also find me on Twitter at WellsNightPlays, and I think that's about it. And I'm sure Tarmack will regularly invite me back to do this thing too, right?
Oh, sure, absolutely.
Since we're like besties.
Well, I have to get you a permanent soapbox first. That's all.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. You'll remake the overlay, so the little border around me will just be a soapbox.
Yeah, instead of a name. That's perfect. On to my stuff. I have a news wrap up that will be up tomorrow, probably around 2:00. It depends on how much sleep I get, because shortly after this stream, I'm going to take about a 20 to 30 minute break because I need to eat, get something to drink, and all of that kind of wonderful stuff. And then I'm going to be back on streaming until I pass out. We will be playing Chrono Trigger because today is the Extra Life game day. So I'm going to be trying to raise some money for them. It's the first time I've done it, so I figured, we'll set the goal at just $100. And if nobody donates, then I'll just donate the $100. It's fine. But I'm going to do that again about a half an hour after I'm done here. We'll get back up and running on streaming some Chrono Trigger. I don't have an awful lot else other than that at the moment. I am working on a focused video on XCOM 2 that we talked about way earlier to talk about that emergent storytelling. That's it. That's all. Let's close this one up, shall we? This has been... Oh, my goodness. What am I losing here? Things grumpy at me. Thank you very much for watching, everybody. This has been the GnomeCast. You can find me on YouTube. The username is the GnomeCast, youtube.com/the GnomeCast. I'm at GnomeCast on Twitter. And I would love it if you would stick around and watch some other stuff. It's been great. Please follow. And we'll do this again in about a month's time from now. So thank you very much. You have yourselves a wonderful evening. And we'll see you again soon.